All Gifts Bestowed by Joshua Gayu. So, before I begin, I probably should point out that if you haven't read All Gifts Bestowed yet, you should probably just stop here, check out the book, and then come back. I think it's really, the short review is it's a good book, and check it out. The end. So go buy it, listen to it, read it, however you like to consume books, and then come back for the rest of the video. Okay? Deal? Good. So back in February, I was lucky enough to be able to pick Mr. Gayu's brain, and one of the books that was coming down the pipeline was All Gifts Bestowed. And so having been a big fan of the Commune series, and also a massive fan of science fiction, specifically books with AI and that sort of thing, this book kind of quickly rose to one of my most anticipated books of the year. Now, when pressed a little bit on what the book was about, he kind of went out of his way, and it was intentionally a little bit vague. And of course, now having finished the book, that conversation makes a heck of a lot more sense. Now, for me, when you hear of a book that's about AI, it's usually one of the first questions you want to find out is the AI a good guy or a bad guy? Is it a villain, or is it just kind of a benign character that goes along with the plot? So, I'm a huge fan of books like The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Robopocalypse, and to be clear, most of the books that have to do with AI are kind of more of a reinvention of the Frankenstein story. And so naturally, having just finished the Commune series, I had just figured that this book would just basically be a robot uprising kind of a book, which would kind of go along with the dystopian feel of the Commune books. But I was wrong. The only thing similar to the Commune series that this book has in common is the attention to detail on the characters. As of yet, the books that have had one thing in common. They've all been very character-driven books, balanced with the plot of the story. And to try not to give too much away about the book, the funny thing is the book is about AI. However, the main AI character really isn't present for that much of the book, but the impact of the interaction between the main character and the AI character heavily influences the rest of the story. And something else, the story itself isn't that long. It's just under 12 hours on Audible, and by the way, it just so happens to be read by my second favorite narrator, which is also a bonus. But since it's not so long, basically picks one good point to hammer home for the entire book. He doesn't clutter it with all kinds of pointless action scenes that ultimately don't affect the whole story. Every bit of that time is meticulously spent on either driving home the point of the story or developing the characters, of which there are very few, so those characters are extremely vivid. And if there's one thing I appreciate about these books, it's the characters. Because if you don't have good characters, nobody really cares about the rest of the story, because there's really no one that you can really root for. There's really no connection with a character that you don't really care for. And so if you happen to be really good at that, then it doesn't really matter what your story is about. It could be a book about going to the moon, or a book about a mass extinction, or whatever. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if your characters stink, the rest of the book will ultimately fail. But if there's one drawback to this book, I'll have to say that the 12 hours kind of did go pretty quick for me. The plot's very simple, but it's very well done. Really focuses on just the one main character and his interactions with this AI, trying to figure out if it's actually alive or it's just really, really good at mimicking life. I really like the contrast between taking a momentous event, the first contact with an artificial intelligence, but being told from a very narrow point of view. Ultimately, kind of an intimate telling of a very grand event.
Consciousness presents through complexity. One of the hardest things to define about consciousness, and they still, like psychologists, psychiatrists, scientists, or cognitive scientists today, they can't define what consciousness is. They don't know how to. And it's interesting to me that we don't know how to define where that threshold is yet. We don't know how to define when that emerges or what it looks like when it does. So the premise of this new story is really just, okay, when we get to the point that we can create a conscious machine, we're not going to be able to tell that we've done it.
He'd said in the past that it was a standalone novel, which, in my opinion, is kind of a shame. Would have loved to have seen where it goes from here, but, you know, it's better to have that than to have a book that you just cannot wait for it to end. That's what I thought. If nothing else, it proves that he's not a one-trick pony. Look forward to many more novels. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time.